we're not sparking on all cylinders. As a country, there's low morale, we're disillusioned with politicians, we're disillusioned with the system, we don't sort of really know who we are. People just don't have any energy left or any life force left. That's when depression arrives. And certainly my theory of depression is that it largely is the result of the exhaustion that follows being continuously stressed. We're shown every day on television the kinds of things that we should be able to own, the kinds of things we should be able to do. And so what's happening is that there's a whole lot of social expectations of the way you're meant to look, the things you're meant to own, which are given out to people every day as, if you like, information about the culture, information about life. And because some people can have those things and other people can't, you get a tremendous kind of social tension.
I think there used to be the notion that we were God's own and that it was a pretty idyllic existence in New Zealand. I don't think that picture applies any longer. And in recent decades, beginning with Rogernomics, things have got tougher.
People knew in 1984 that something had to change. I don't think that was in question, but it's how the change process goes ahead that really counts. And we had the whole restructuring process dumped on us in an entirely non-consensual kind of way. In social and personal terms, the costs have been very, very high, in my view. By simply taking some of the publicly available statistics, which you can find in the New Zealand Yearbook, and sources such as that, it's quite amazing to see those graphs. Virtually everything, be it depression or suicide or family breakdown or homicide, and a lot of health and mental health indicators rocket up after 1984. We could have done it totally differently. Our politicians deny our having poverty, but we've got poverty, all right. And the greater the gap between rich and poor, the greater the social stress, and the greater all the symptoms are. And what we're seeing every day is, I think, the result of that.
What actually I'm doing is taping the harnesses, just put all the components that's needed. See, I've got to spot time them or full tape, spiral, whatever.
Stress is any experience or situation that pushes you out of balance. Usually we recover from stresses, like if we have a tiring day's work, we get a good night's sleep and we feel better. But if you don't feel rested after sleep, that stress can build up in your system.
I am very, very stressed at the moment. Due to these things coming up, can be affected me and my family. I don't want to leave. I don't want this job to go, but it's nothing I can do.
Yesterday I was a social worker, actor, mediator, coach, taxi driver and careers advisor. On Thursday, a fundraiser, referee, curriculum implementer and motivator. On Wednesday, a report writer, a public relations officer, absentee checker. Tuesday, an administrator, a crowd controller, uniform enforcer and an accountant. On Monday, a periodic detention supervisor, a relationship counsellor, comedian, a spell checker, Jack and Jill of all trades, and I attended 3 meetings. Tomorrow, I get paid for being a teacher. Isn't that choice? I think that says it.
If other teachers have trouble with our Māori or Polynesian students, they'll go to the Māori teacher and they expect you to be just on board then and there. We're the only face that I guess the kids feel really, comfortable culturally. And so that, you know, if you say no, how I see it is you're turning our people away. So you carry on.
I hate it. I hate shopping. The hassle of finding the cheapest things and still managing to get everything that you want, the frustration at knowing that you can't get things that you'd like to get. You know, small bags of chippies for the kids for lunch, chocolate biscuits. Bananas are a luxury in our house. We don't have them very much. We could just go on and on and on, you know.
How are you? Hot and bothered I am.
I was in a relationship that was pretty violent, pretty 2.5-year relationship. And the stresses that came with that were unbelievable. I hated myself for putting up with stuff that I knew I shouldn't have been putting up with, but somewhere in the middle of it all, I'd lost myself and I didn't actually trust myself anymore. I didn't trust my judgment. I didn't like myself very much. I was living in an explosion, in a minefield. I never knew from one minute to the next when it was going to happen.
Throughout this century, there's been an increasing interest in the subject of stress, particularly from the works of Hans Selye, who identified a stress response. In the acute response, this seems to be a good thing. It allows you to do more and to be more active. But as he pointed out, if your stress response remains stuck, then it can become harmful.
Or even premature death.
The rest home had noted she'd been getting progressively more and more short of breath. Usually once every call day I'd have to discuss something fairly major with patient or family, and those are usually the worst situations because there's been no forewarning or any planning, and suddenly the family are faced with some terrible decisions, usually at a time when they're emotionally upset and possibly not thinking clearly because they're so upset. But I find the thing that keeps me awake at night when I go home is when I've had someone come in who's perhaps not dangerously unwell, but for which I can't find a specific diagnosis. And often when I'm driving home at night, I think, have I missed something? Was there something that I didn't, quite pick up on there? And it's usually those patients that I worry about at night time.
Superimposed within our brain is the cortex, and this has very major implications because unlike other animals which very much respond to the stimuli in the immediate moment, in the here and now, we've evolved language which gives us the capacity to encode information so we can learn about and hear about things occurring that aren't in the here and now. And of course the mass media amplify this as well. We're bombarded with stimuli of horrendous things. If I have a fear of flying and I'm booked to fly to Australia in a month's time, I can bring the stress of that event right forward. I think the extraordinary cognitive development of human beings does set them up for probably higher and more varied forms of stress.
The one time this century when mental illness was more common in England and Wales was just after the First World War. One of the reasons for that was shell shock, or neurasthenia, as it was then called. One of the defining characteristics of neurasthenia is that people are tired and they can't do anything. They can't walk, they can't speak. Sometimes they can't see. It was clearly a very stressful time on the battlefield. Very high rate of casualties, quite likely to end up maimed or wounded or dead. And there was a dilemma for the soldiers. If they went over the top of the trench, they got shot. If they didn't go over the top of the trench, they also got shot, or at least some of them did, by their own side. One of the few ways you can solve a dilemma is not to do anything. And one of the interesting things is looking at the differences between the officers and the squaddies, the troops. Because of course the troops' dilemma was whether to go over the top or not. The officers' dilemma was whether to give the order or not. So what they got was the hysterical dysphonia. They couldn't speak. And there's quite a large proportion of officers with hysterical dysphonia during the First World War.